Hi, I'm Kelly at Book and Paper Arts, and today I'm going to talk about working in your pages using a technique called Etegami. Etegami is a fancy way of saying that you're going to be making simple, almost naive drawings and paintings, and then adding some hand lettering, some words. That's it. You can use them to make, this is a bookmark, you can make a card, but usually, of course, because I work in journals, I like to add Etegami in my journal pages. It might be in my illustrated travel journal, my visual diary, or in this case, I'm going to be putting these pages in my commonplace book, which is a little notebook that I have for ideas, facts, strange things that I don't want to forget, and quotes. And quotes. So many ways you can use these Etegami techniques in your own projects. Please stay tuned. If you like journal arts, altered books, vintage books, paper, and other ephemera, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and be sure and turn on the notifications. And you will have more of them in your life. Let's go make some pages. There is so much to cover in Etegami that I could easily have made this into, say, a 3-hour online class. But I don't wanna. Instead, I am going to give myself the luxury of making this video longer and slower than my videos usually are. That way we can go into more detail, more layers about the technique and ways to adapt it, and meander down some creative pathways. It's, as I said, it's super simple, super easy, because all you need is paper, ink, and color. I'm going to talk about the materials in a few minutes at length, including some modifications and substitutions in case you don't have those or you don't like them, because today, no excuses. I'm going to get making. After I talk about the materials, I'm going to make some pages in real time so you can see what all the fuss is about. But first, let's look at some examples and talk about what it is and how it came to be, because who doesn't like a story with their ink and paper? 50 years ago, there was a Japanese calligrapher named Kunio Koke. That's probably not how you pronounce it. I'm sorry. He was working in Japanese ink work and lettering, which is a discipline that is incredibly traditional, constricted. It takes many years of training and practice, and it has very, very, very strict rules. He found this frustrating, so he decided to break out a little bit, and he started making work for himself that was very, very simple, very free. He said Etegami is about enjoying the process, about wanting to amuse, comfort, or maybe stimulate the receiver. And he said receiver because these started out as postcards. The idea was to make postcards. Since the 700s, giving postcards for New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, in Japan has been a tradition. And he decided to take that tradition and kind of mess with it and blow it up. He wanted to be able to work without rules. So today we don't really have rules. However, there are some guidelines for working with Etegami. The first one is you want to make an outline with black ink or dark ink. And it has got to be simple, simple, simple. The style is deliberately naive. Or if you're like me, just straight up naive. Because drawing's not my strong card. but I like to draw anyway. Look at this guy. It's a groundhog coming out of his hole. The hole is a line here, and then this is not really what you would call a realistic groundhog. It just has a line here like a potato, and then a dot, and then a bloop bloop. Okay, then you're done. Look at this pear. Dark line, just a bloop like that, and then a stem. It's a pear. Here's an eggplant. Simple, messy line. It's squiggly here. It's wobbly there. It doesn't matter. So you're going to start with your black line with a simple line drawing. And then you're going to add color. Keep it to a minimum. 3 colors is about as many as you want to go with. Let's see, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's 5, but here's 2. Here's 2. So we're going to add some color to the black line drawing. Then lettering. And again, I'm going to talk about all of these aspects in more depth later. Look at this. It's clearly a flower, but it's blousy and messy. It does not have perspective. And look at this, the writing, which was done with a brush or maybe even a stick. Very messy. But that's okay, because one of the other guidelines about working in Etegami, and this is probably the only one of the few that you need to stick with, is once you start drawing, you keep drawing. You don't do your teapot, you don't do your swan 7 times until you get it right and then commit to making your card. No. If you start making your line on the page, you have to follow through. That's sort of the ethos here, is that the more important thing is that you are making the lines on the page, getting it down, not that you're drawing it well. It's, I don't know, almost like a superstition, and I like it. Look at this one. Those who dislike cats will be carried to the cemetery in the rain. By the way, I did not make these Etegami. These are by an artist named Debbie DeSanko, and you can find her work on Pinterest and on her website, which I will link to in the text box below this video, so you can go and see more of her work and get some inspiration. Again, that's not like any cat I've ever seen in real life. Also, you can see the ink is bleeding, and she didn't stop and then do it over again. She just let it feather, and that's fine. And it's so effective. Another guideline is about the words, because it is important. It does need to have the 2 components, the image and the words. The words do not have to correspond to your image. In fact, it's not really encouraged. It's almost as if they're 2 separate things, but somehow come together to make a third thing. So just because you draw an eggplant, you don't have to write a haiku about an eggplant. Moving on to the materials. Again, it's very simple. Paper, ink, and color. And we are going to be talking about, if you have ink, you've got to put it on with something. We're going to be looking at different ways that you can work with ink, brushes, and whatnot. Start with paper. Traditionally, probably a rice paper or mulberry paper would have been used. And this is a mulberry paper. It's made from fibers from a mulberry plant. You can get this in an craft store, an art supply store, or you can buy it online. Do a quick search, see if you can find somebody that makes their own paper. You might even find it on eBay. It's not expensive. A paper this thin is not in my everyday style personally. So I'm going to be doing more of the work for myself using a watercolor paper. And this is between the weight of a cardstock and a paper. You could also use mixed media paper. Don't got it? Use copier paper. Use a notebook. Use a school notebook with lines on it. Embrace it. Remember, clumsiness has its charm. So use what you got and then lean into it. I'm not going to be working on loose sheets, however, so much as adding pages in my book, my books, my many, 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 many journals. This is my latest travel diary, and this is a page I've started. I'm going to come back to in a minute. Guess what it's about? Go on, guess. And I'm going to be. I don't want to use this for every page. It's big and ungainly, but for every page, every once in a while, it's a very effective way to add a page. Here's a notebook that's been kicking around my stash for yonks. It's an accordion book by Hanamula. And I haven't, but I'm thinking that this would make, because it's a postcard size, so this would make a great series of Etegami pages, which you could then keep or give away. Here's a handmade book, very similar, that I made myself just from folding watercolor paper. And again, and this was even quite a bit lighter. But I like the size, I like the landscape format. So make your own book and fill that up with some drawings. But as I said at the beginning, what I'm going to focus on, and the whole reason I've started down this rabbit hole, is because I want to use it in my commonplace book, which is a book where I put science, facts, art, inspiration, curious stuff, song lyrics, you name it, it goes in the book. And I am going to be making some of the pages using this Etegami technique. Use what you got. As we saw earlier, most of these are going to start with a thick black line. This, again, is not a rule. It is a guideline. I have seen some Etegami work on Pinterest that had no lines at all, just color, very suggestive and atmospheric. But today we're going to start off with the black line. And then if you like this technique, then experiment with using something else. Traditionally, a Sumi ink or an India ink would have been used, which is what I've got here. It's very black, it's water fast, although I do think you can get India ink in colors, someone told me, but it's very color fast. When it goes down, it's staying down, and that's where you're getting that strong line. If you don't have it, no worries, use what you have. I'm going to be showing some pages using a fountain pen ink. This is water soluble, so even after it goes down and it dries, it might make a thick line, but it will interact when I add the wet color to it. And that's okay. It's just a different style. You can also use, let's see, I've got an acrylic marker here, which is going to give a nice, very thick line. I've experimented using a charcoal pencil. Those are easy to come by. That makes a nice thick line. It's just a little bit different. You can use a plain old grocery store pen. Okay. Look around. Use a crayon. So any kind of pen will work, or it makes a dark line. Go get them. If you are going to use the ink, let's see, this is the India ink. Traditionally, when this would have been done with a brush, as Japanese calligraphy is done with a brush. I actually went out and bought some inexpensive nylon brushes. I don't recommend you use your really, really good fine paint brushes, your watercolor brushes with this black ink. It's it sticks around for quite a while, let me tell you. So instead, you might want to use some kids' brushes or some cheaper brushes. Nylon is good because the ink just rinses right out. I've also experimenting with using different ways of putting the ink down. This is a bamboo pen. It's a fancy name for a stick that I paid way too much money for. Okay, so again, I'm getting that messy line here because it's just not a very exact tip. But that's kind of fun. It's that awkwardness, that clumsiness that's fun and liberating. If you don't have one of those, here's a brochette, or use an orange stick like you do with manicures and whatnot. So I'm just dipping it in the ink. I'm going to get a fine line here. Well, that doesn't like that. Use a fine line. Or get it in there and get a gloppy line. It's a look. So play around with different tools, maybe a stick or a twig, different brushes, and see what you can come up with as far as making your initial lines. I do have to say that when I bought this one, it's Pabio. It came with a pipette, a dropper, and I like it a lot. It's pretty clumsy and so much fun. I have tried using a pipette that did not come, it had sort of a rounded tip. I wasn't as happy with it, but if you have an eyedropper or a pipette that you want to experiment with, do that too. When it comes to adding the color, I'm going to be using watercolor because that's what I work in. But by all means, you could also use a watered down gouache or even a watered down acrylic. Or you may want to, what you could use is if you have a water soluble ink stick or a watercolor pencil. You could use those as well. So look around you. If you don't have something that's water-based, by all means, use a pencil. Use a colored pencil or a crayon. Just play with it, and you're going to get an effect that makes you happy. As for what to draw, look around you. Find something, take some time, look around, find something that makes you happy, that you would like to draw. Keep it simple. I noticed that when I was looking for images of Etegami to show today that plants and fruit tend to show up a lot. They're easy to find and usually pretty easy to draw if you're not too fussy. You could do shoes, a hat, your cat or dog. I don't know. Today I have some figs, a rock. Okay, this is a very cool rock, but it's just a rock. a teacup. Yeah, teacups and teapots are kind of popular when you look at traditional Etegami. And why wouldn't they be? And then I also have this really beautiful rose that I just cut from the yard on the way in. So look around, find something simple, get started. If I was going to offer any advice about composition, it would be remember that you need to leave space for your letters, your words, and your writing. But don't overcompose. It would be better just to get started making these, practicing, playing around, and seeing how they turn out. Squash the letters in there if you gotta. It's just paper, people. And you'll find out what style will work for you. One thing that is recommended or a guideline is that you lean into that loosey-goosey style. To wit, all right, I'm going to take my brush here and dip it in my ink and got some figs. And I am now going to hold my brush at a right angle to the page. And I'm going to keep my wrist nice and loose. So I really can't control a whole lot of what I'm doing. And that's part of it. Once you've started, you got to commit. You got to go through with it. All right, there we go. Figs. They're figs. They're figs because I say they are. And I like it. Now let's look at doing that with the, let's see, with the bamboo pen. Or again, you could use your brochette or what you will. Okay, let's look at this rock. Now let's look at a teacup. Okay. So I'm dipping it in there and getting it nice and gloppy because it's not going to have a lot of absorption. It's a stick. So make it very gloppy. And again, I'm just going to hold it up like this. Whoa, not really. Not really getting perspective, are we? I don't wanna. This is about being clumsy and awkward and liberated and exuberant. That's way more important than a realistic drawing here. Haha, that's my teacup. Those are my figs. And I'm sticking to it. This is one where I'm going to use the fountain pen ink, which will be water soluble, but we're just going to see how that goes. So, just holding my my brush nice and loose. Very much just using this flower as a reference. Not exact. It's hardly what you would call a botanical rendition. Just holding my brush nice and loose. Or if you've got a pencil or a pen, just hold it nice and loose. One of my favorite things to draw are feathers. They're forgiving and evocative. So now I'm using the charcoal pencil and just showing, I'm holding it loose, kind of. To get a firm line, I'm having to lean into it, but I'm definitely not over controlling the line. So we'll come back to that and make kind of a bookmark out of it. Normally, if I was adding color using watercolor, I would use a palette or a mixing tray. But today I'm just going to work straight from the paints for a couple of reasons. One is that there's just not a lot of space here, and the paint is meant to be the color's meant to be more evocative rather than an accurate painting. Also, in all of the tutorials I looked at before I did this, they were all painting directly from the paint and not using a mixing tray, so... Now, one thing, again, this is a guideline that I found over and over again, was that in adding color, you're encouraged not so much to add strokes, but to tap or pat in your color. Not sure why this is, possibly to let it bleed and feather, or maybe to double down on that imperfection. So I'm going to follow that. Again, as you do these, as you make more of these, you'll feel what you want to make. And if you feel like using a mixing tray and getting a finer paint job, that's fine. A more traditional, I guess I should say more traditional painting. But I'm going to start off by patting. Patting, kind of bouncing the color there. And I'm keeping this to, let's see, do I have another green there? What's that? Kind of a blue-green. Okay, I'm not sure that's what we would find in nature, but I can do whatever I want. And it adds a little bit of contrast and interest. And then if you want to, you can also add a more traditional wash to your background so that you are, again, adding some interest to your page. So play around, make a bunch of these, try them all the different ways, and see what your style will evolve. You will find your style, and your style will find you. I promise. Here is a feather, another feather that I've done in my commonplace book. And I'm going to use a different technique here for adding some color. I've got my line down with my India ink. And now I'm going to do a wet on wet. So I've just colored in with some water here. And now I do have my watercolor in my mixing tray. It's a Payne's Gray. It's very dark indeed. And I'm just going to pick that up with my brush and then add it to the water, and it's going to move around. Again, I'm kind of patting here, but let's see. Make it darker up here, and then let it feather and bleed into the bottom, which is then the lighter shade. And I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to add some color now to this this page in my travel journal. And again, I'm using a more traditional way here. I'm not worried about making it perfect, though. You know, all matchy-matchy, perfectly in the lines. If it goes over, that's fine. As far as I'm concerned, there are only 2 flavors necessary on this planet for gelato, and that's going to be pistachio. Okay, a really good pistachio is not going to be this bright green. It's going to be super pale. But I don't care. I know what it is. And then, let's see, pistachio and chocolate. That's it. Pistachio and chocolate. That's all you need. And I'm sure you disagree. Let me know in the comments. We can just talk about what's wrong with talking about ice cream. I'm going to let that bleed a little bit. I'm not too concerned about that. I'm going to pick up some of this green, though. It was bugging me because that's actually really more of the color that you want to see your pistachio goodies be, that light green. But I'm going to leave that where it's melted in a little bit, as ice cream does. Here's a sample using the fountain pen ink rather than the India ink. And as I predicted, the fountain pen ink does react with the wet paint. So I'm going to try, that's not necessarily bad. It's a little bit purple, it's atmospheric, it's a look. But I'm going to try it again. It is going to feather, but this time I'm going to, instead of using the paint that's diluted in the mixing tray, I'm going to pick the paint up. I've activated the colors by squirting a little bit, and now I'm just going to go ahead and pick that up on the brush, and it's a lot thicker. It's still going to react, but especially if I do that patting technique, I can get in there and just add some suggestions of the color without actually painting the whole piece as you would, again, if you were doing a botanical or something else. So I'm just patting in some of that very, very concentrated color. If it feathers, if it reacts with the fountain pen ink, that's fine. And then same thing here with the leaves. Patting the color in, just here and there. So it's, not realistic, but it's fun and can be exuberant. And once you've started, you got to commit to it, lean into it. Don't be afraid. See what happens. Here's some figs, and I've made a little bit of a purple here using the mixing tray. You know what? I got this in Mississippi last week in a Dollar General, which are these really inexpensive places that are all over Mississippi. And a lot of times that's all people have because they are in the middle of nowhere. And I've never seen one that wasn't a little bit grim on the inside, but there's also something that's kind of hopeful about them. And that is that even though they're in the middle of nowhere and they're super, super inexpensive, they always have a craft section. And so if I'm in one, I like to look and see what they've got. And they had these palettes, little teeny tiny baby palettes, and they were like 6 for $1. Look at that. So I think there's something very hopeful about the fact that even in these little bit sad, sacky places, they know that people are hungry to make things and create, and so they're getting the stuff, the inexpensive, imperfect stuff out there, and I love that. I also really love these teeny tiny palettes, which can be used as mixing trays, and they don't weigh much, and they're going in my travel journal kit. So I'm adding the color to these figs, and I'm doing it in a gloppy way. I'm deliberately not making it go all the way to the edge. Figs. And I'm going to add a little bit of contrasting color here. So now I could use this as a card after I add my lettering. Or I can glue this into one of my books and journals, and it will make a page. I'm going to actually add a little bit of splatters here. Still going to be able to add my text and some words, but that's just going to add a little bit of interest to the page since we're not using a lot of color. While there's a lot to be said for drawing from what's in front of you, just found objects, you can also use source materials that you have to draw from. This is a book that I call it my book of inspiration. And I have, let's go up here. I've gone through for a long time, and if there's an image that I love, maybe on Instagram or Pinterest or by my bus stop, it's a photo, I take them and I print them up, or I cut them out of newspapers. These are from newspapers. And then I put them in my inspiration book. I actually have a video showing how you can make your own inspiration book. This is just from a cheap 1970s textbook. And you just start putting things in here. That would be a very good drawing for an Etegami card or page. And then you could add some words to that. In fact, I'm going to be doing that later. I like that a lot. So by all means, if you run out of figs and hats and teacups, find images out there in the wild, in books and coffee table books and online, and take photographs and draw from those and add to your library of images for Etegami and what you will. It's time to talk about lettering, adding our handwritten element, the writing to the page or the card. I am going to be using some quotes in a moment, but I'm going to start out with something super easy to kind of get us into it. You can see here that you want to keep your writing simple, short, and to the point, partly because there's not a whole lot of room, and partly because you're going to be working with ink or a liquid media, and again, this loosey-goosey brush or stick, and it's not going to give you a lot of definition, a lot of fine control. And you don't want that. That's part of the clumsiness as charming aspect of Etegami. So keep it short and sweet. Let's see. Here's my ink. And I've gone ahead and one thing I like to do is mix and match capital letters with lowercase letters. You can see these are super jumbly and messy. This is gelato. Okay, that's not really giving me a lot there. We're going to abandon that. Let's see. Let's try it with the brush. I'm getting some big splotchy marks. I'm I'm still holding my brush loosely, but maybe with a little bit more control than I had with the drawing. This one's feathering a little bit. That's just fine. Let's see. Okay. And that's that page done. So you can see how easy it is. It's going to be a little bit different in this visual diary. Make a little bit of a different kind of page. This time I'm going to add the lettering using a pen, a real pen. But I still want to get that loose, free, exuberant feeling that you want with Etegami. So this is a quote: "To create is to make a pact with nothingness." I have my pen, I'm holding it somewhat loose. So it's almost at a right angle to the page. I'm mixing in, I'm alternating between capital letters and lowercase. Oops, it doesn't fit. That's okay. Smush it in there. I'm smushing them in there. So I'm making it loosey-goosey, fun, pretty, and in a weird way, powerful. So don't be afraid to embrace the imperfect messiness by holding your pen a little bit loose and seeing what you get. On this one, I'm going to add the lettering with this fountain pen ink and a twig. Using twigs is fun, but you takes your chances. Okay, let's see. Ooh, that's bold. Squash it in there. And that is a quote by Annie Dillard. "All day long, I feel created." And so look at that. That's very much in your exuberant, clumsy is charming, I'm going with it idea. You really can't do it wrong. I did this one with a rusty old dip pen, and I couldn't get control with this thing if I wanted to. So you can see it was pretty rough going. And that's okay. Just really don't be afraid to make it bold and messy. This is a page in my commonplace book, and I'm using this acrylic pen, marker pen, but you could use a Sharpie or any more of a marker, any kind of a marker. I love putting quotes, song lyrics, things like this in my commonplace book. And anyway, I'm holding it a little bit loose, but I do want some control. But still way looser than I would do if I was writing something else. What's wrong with and that is from a poem by Mary Oliver. And anyway, what's wrong with maybe? So that's going to make a really good page in my commonplace book. You've got some facts and some art, and then you've got a quote, a really bold page with a quote on it. There it is, your introduction to using Etegami in your pages and in your projects. Before I go, I want to say again that please don't wait until you have the perfect supplies to get started making. Don't wait until you have the fancy ink or the nylon brush or whatnot. The supplies don't matter nearly as much as your curiosity and as much as the fact that you want to make something and there's something inside of you trying to get out onto the paper. If your inner critic tries to say to you, don't start yet because your materials aren't good enough, your art supplies aren't good enough, you tell your inner critic, oh yeah, watch me make with what I've got. And you will not be sorry with what happens and what comes. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments below. Especially if you have some ideas about using images and words in your pages. And we can all compare notes. Until later, get up and go make something.